Hello and welcome to From the Be All End, the Burnley podcast. I'm not quite sure what to call this episode, really. I guess it's a bit of a debrief of Sunderland 3, Burnley 0. I guess it's a bit of a debrief of the January transfer window. And I guess it's a bit of a, where the hell do we go from here?
It's a wake.
Yeah, it is a wake, yeah. It feels a bit like a wake. That was the voice of Chris Boden. He joins me along with Martin Barnes, the former editor of When the Ball Moves. Chris, I mean, you described it as a wake. I mean, it does just feel 24 hours afterwards, or 24 hours after we're probably about 2-0 down at this stage when we're recording, that the inevitable, I saw a Paddy Power tweet that basically said, for the sake of everyone, just relegate Burnley and Wolves now. There is no way that we are surviving in the Premier League this season, is there?
Well, not when you're going to finish bottom. and I sincerely believe, I think Wolves will, Wolves at least seem to be having a go last few games. We've waved the white flag. We've waved the white flag in the transfer window. We waved the white flag on the pitch last night. It's just, honestly, I'm one of these. So when I'm at games, obviously when I was in a working capacity, I couldn't leave games. There's many a time I can remember being 5-0 down at Ipswich at half time, and I very much wanted to go home. And Wickham, I think we were 4-0 down at Wickham at half time, and I wanted to go home. Obviously, I couldn't. I was working, but as a fan, I've always stayed to the end. But when that second goal went in last night, I would say I was watching Brief on Sky Sports. I switched it off. I'd had enough, and I didn't want to see it anymore because I'd just fed up. As I tweeted, you wanted to see something from Burnley last night. Burnley simply had to win last night to give themselves any hope whatsoever. If they win last night and then you're eyeing up West Ham at home, who were a funny side, they're quite flaky, and you love playing West Ham at home. Often in the Premier League, it's one of those where they don't quite fancy it. It's cold, often wet, swirling wind, and many a time we come away with a 3-0 win at home to West Ham. And but they just, I say, we don't play with any urgency or tempo. We don't press. We don't defend well. You look at all these metrics that Sky were offering up last night in the Premier League, and we're 19th, 20th in everything.
Yeah,
and it's just abysmal. And I think after I'm speaking to Radio Lancashire after the Newcastle game away 2 months ago and saying, well, who else can get any more out of this group of players? And this group of players are limited, but I think the time comes when what we've seen for the next 2 months, even the draws, again, you look at the United, Liverpool, Spurs games. Statistically, we've been pumped in all those games. I'll see Sesko had 7 shots on target against us. They've had 2 off the line. They've hit the woodwork. They've one that was disallowed for a ludicrous decision. It could have been any number against United, if we're being honest. And I go back to Scott Parker's record. I was prepared to write off his time at Bournemouth because he obviously, he got into a bit of a falling out with the board, and he only had sort of 4 or 5 games at the start of that season, and just, his position was untenable, and he left. But if you add it up, was it 12 wins in 76 Premier League games as a manager? Well, you ideally need 10 wins out of 38 to stay in the Premier League, and it's just not good enough, is it? He's getting 12 in 76.
Yeah.
No, but where do you go?
Martin messaged me asking if he was going to be good cop, and I said he was going to be less depressed cop. We've had the depressed cop, the one who wonders what life is all about after many years on the beat. Martin, you decided to do a reverse Chris Boden and only started watching after we were 2-0 down, didn't you? I think you basically took over. We watched it in relay last night. But, I mean, Chris is right, isn't he? I mean, all of the metrics that we would look at, and I mean, metrics as fans, commitment, desire, urgency, pressing, defending like your lives depended on it. If you're a Sunderland fan, you're going away from yesterday's game at the Stadium of Light going, absolutely spot on. Dan Ballard, the lad out on the wing who scored the third. They're the kind of traits we want to see in players. Yet we've got Scott Parker basically saying we showed no purpose, no urgency in any part of our game, in any phase of the game. There's something really, really wrong, isn't there? In terms of, whatever it is, the player's not performing as Scott Parker wants, the player's not having the ability to do that. There is a big problem, isn't there? And I'm not quite sure you're going to be any less depressed than Chris Boden, especially with the cold that you've got.
Yeah, no, full of it. So the best sort of word I can come up with is incomprehensible, because there are so many things that I just don't quite understand. If the players didn't want to play for him, surely they would have just been throwing in performances that were frankly dreadful against a big three. Okay, I don't understand last night. If you remember before the game, I said for us to get anything out of that fixture, we've got to be kind of aggressive. Yeah. We've got to be in the faces. And frankly, it was exactly the opposite. You get down to the tactics and the formation, as was mentioned on the rapid reaction yesterday. They've got one big lad up front. Why do we go with three centre-halves? Why do we go with the three centre-halves that we pick? If you know he's going to be a bit of a big unit, it's going to be a handful. If all the centre-halves are fit, that's Joe Worrell all day long. Limited player, perhaps.
As we saw at Newcastle. He's going
to be the guy that'll get in. He'll win your headers. He'll not take any crap off that striker, and he'll come off there 50-50 at worst. All right. So, but there's so many things that are incomprehensible. The manager's substitutions at half time. If we're 2-0 down, you've got to go two up front. It looked like he was just, like you say, moving deck chairs on the Titanic. We're just putting players on for the sake of it. And every time we brought one on, 5 minutes later after the last one, Sky Sports are saying, well, it's made no difference. And it didn't make any difference. And I just don't understand. I don't understand why they put that sort of level of performance in at a stadium like that, where you know it's going to be hostile. Basically one team should have been really up for that game, and that was us.
Yeah.
If any team wants to be on the beach, that was Sunderland, because they're probably going to fall short of the European places, but they're not in any danger at all.
No.
And it was exactly the opposite of what we'd expect. So incomprehensible is the word I come back to. There's so little that I can kind of go, well, I get that, I understand that. And there's enough seasoned pros in that team. It's not just a bunch of young lads that, I don't know. I don't know whether they've had enough of the tactics. I don't know whether the lack of incoming transfers has annoyed them. But the professional sports people, there's people that have travelled to go and watch that. They should all be ashamed of that. Absolutely ashamed. And the only reason I only tuned in for the last bit was I just thought, I may as well, because as soon as I saw the first goal in, I was going to dash off the exercise, but I thought there was no chance. Second one goes in, well, that's it. Game's done, isn't it? So it was. I don't really know why I watched the second half, if I'm honest. That's another incomprehensible thing. Maybe I thought it was going to be the miracle cure for my cold. I don't know. But putting myself through the 7 rings of hell or whatever it is with Dante. But no. Stadium of you-know-what that rhymes with light last night. No mistake.
Yeah. And Chris, I mean, the substitution at half-time weirdly made us look slightly better. But it's the 4th game this season where we've not registered a shot on target. I think the XG was 0.06. Seb Hutchinson and I think it was Andy Hinchcliffe on Sky were basically just. It was almost ridicule. And Simon mentioned this. I mean, I think John Champion on the World Feed in the US was basically saying, Burnley go down, they collect the parachute money, they come back up, and they're never any better. That is surely a sign, when the commentators are taking the piss, that something has to change. Now, we chose to dismiss the views of Fulham and Bournemouth fans about Scott Parker football. Last night it spilled over. I believe there was a sign outside Gawthorpe in the early hours that said Parker out, and Scott Parker, your football is the thing that rhymes with the Stadium of Light, and we want Parker out, and things like that. Something has got to change. And as much as we've said, look, Scott Parker, the man, respect him, he's done a great job in the Championship last season. it needs a bit of balls from somebody, doesn't it? Whether that's Parker to say, look, I've gone as far as I can go, or it's ALK and the board and Alan Pace to say, we sacked Sean Dyche for a lot less. And I know, there you go, that's your bingo. There you are, Sean Dyche, 10 minutes, 13 seconds in. It's incomprehensible that we've got to this stage where we missed the opportunity to get rid of him and perhaps give a new manager a transfer window. We've got to the end of the transfer window with just one incoming who was fit enough for the bench but played no part yesterday and won't play on Saturday, I don't think, because he's obviously a West Ham player. Where am I going wrong in my calculation, Chris?
Well, there's a lot of things. And you go back to, I mean, essentially, Sean wasn't ALK's man, albeit
No.
they gave him a new contract and a job for life if he wanted it. It was time. It was stale. You know, I think everyone, you know, there were a lot of, you know, there was some upset. There was some quite pleased, no doubt. You know, when Sean got the sack, and you know, he tried to get that bounce into the side over the last few games. I think give it a go, didn't they, under Jack Horn and Ben Mee and company? It's you know, they just fell short. You know, I never thought they were going to get a result against Newcastle on the last day, but
No.
if you give them that, you know, beat Newcastle on the last day of the season at home, you know, you're probably taking it. But and then to their credit, they've gone out and pinpointed company. As I said before, you know, speaking to the Belgian journalists at the time, are almost like, what on earth do you want this fella for?
Very much so.
You know, he's been at Anderlecht for a couple of years. He's achieved the square root of now, basically. You know, what on earth do you see in him? But they saw something, and his football delivered a dream season. You know, it's like light years away. You know, the manner we played from what we've seen over the last 18 months or so. And I say I was pretty do what they want with company. You know, halfway stage, you know, it's failed miserably. Let's get shut, sort of thing, or keep on. It probably should have sacked him, but then, you know, he then ends up not sacking him, and gets stitched up. His company gets a job that, you know, no one on the planet believed he was going to get. And again, he goes out and identifies a man who delivered. I'm not, you know, whatever people think of the style, he's delivered 100 points, and, you know, we're level on points with the championship winners again. 2 defeats, the defensive record, etc., etc., etc. It was dull as dishwater to watch for 75% of the time, probably. But, you know, we got the job done, and those records, I dare say, will, you know, they'll be probably still standing when I'm dead. You know what I mean? It's one of them things, isn't it? But we all knew, like I say, go back to Parker's record in the Premier. You're not going to sack him when you've won promotion with 100 points.
No.
So we back him. And we said, you look at, said a few times, in the who's making the signings? Are they data signings? Are they Pace signings? Are they Parker signings? Are they a collection of all three? Luke Chowner might go on and be an absolute world beater for Burnley Football Club, but what we needed wasn't a throw of the dice. On a 20 odd year old, you know, lad in his young 20s with no real elite top 5 league senior football experience. You know, bits and pieces here and there, like with Koleosho, a couple of years before. Like we spent, you know, sort of like 14, 15 million euro on him that could have gone on free signings or whatever, or experience, the more of the like of Dubravka, and as disappointing as Kyle Walker's been for a period of time, that sort of player. It's been a hodgepodge of recruitment, and we've paid for it. And you know, Leeds had their idea, didn't they? We want to sign the land of the giants, and we're going to be physical, and we're going to go down that route. Sunderland do I think they believe the team at Wembley in the playoff final cost £4 million. Have then gone out and gone bonkers by their modern standards, and the recruitment's been magnificent. But we thought you live or die by your recruitment. As we were saying 2 years ago, they got it wrong, and they've got it wrong again. And to only bring one player in from your relegation rivals who that had him in one squad since September, it says everything to me.
Yeah. And Martin, just looking at the ALK record in the Premier League, the overall record is a win ratio of 17.07%, 21 wins, 33 draws, 69 defeats from 123 games. 13 of those wins came in the combined reigns of Dyche and Jackson. So 10 wins for Sean Dyche, 17 draws, 26 defeats. Jackson, 3 wins, 2 draws, 3 defeats in his 8 games. Company, 5 wins, 8 draws, 25 defeats. Parker, 3 wins, 6 draws, 15 defeats. People are, and somebody pointed this out on Up the Clarets, people are still talking like ALK are new to this, as in, they're still a new board. They've been here 5 years. It just looks like they've not got an idea on what is needed. And I don't know who they're being advised by. I know there's Paul Jenkins, who is the kind of head of, director of football operations, an ALK man who they brought in. We got the recruitment team, which I think is still headed by the guy, is it Lee Mooney, who was with Company. Is there a kind of blind spot there for ALK where they're kind of, we know they're not football, soccer people, call it what you will, and not everybody is, and we're not using that as a stick to beat them with, and we've praised them in terms of getting people into key positions at times where they're getting a help on how to run a football club. That's a turgid record, isn't it? 21 wins, 33 draws, 69 defeats from 123 Premier League games. It does show a level of cluelessness when it comes to what's needed from a recruitment point of view, doesn't it? Or they're relying too heavily on, the data, which we know Alan Pace is a huge fan of.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is indefensible, isn't it, really? It's whatever way you look at it, it's absolutely shambolic. And there just needs to be a few really honest and difficult conversations happening around the club. If they're going to keep Parker, they need to be talking to him about his style of football, don't they? We've talked about the handbrake being off, etc., etc. That's one conversation that needs to happen. We're happy to keep you on the proviso that X, Y, and Z happens in terms of the style. And I think he needs to be, we've talked about whether he's emotional enough in certain ways, but has he got the cojones to sort of say back to them, right, I want a bit more control over the players that we're getting, and I want a bit more control about the identity. Because I think you're right. I think we end up with this hodgepodge, a mishmash of ideas where we've got certain types of players from here, there, and everywhere, and then the cohesion just isn't there. They need to really sort of decide, look at the clubs that have done it well. What are they doing that is working? Can we emulate that? And if we can't, what can we do? Because at the moment, I think you're right. I mean, the fact that they don't necessarily understand football is definitely not helping. I think that maybe the people that are in key positions that we probably as fans don't see, are they doing a good enough job? Are they being held to account? That's something else, isn't it? Because Parker's the sort of public face, he's the manager, and we all base a lot of the criticism on the fact that when we used to go watch football when we were in our teens, the manager signed the players, the manager picked the team, the manager did everything. Okay, and that just isn't the case now. So ALK do have to kind of take a lot of responsibility because they are the one constant in the last 4.5 seasons. And, you go back to the Dyche thing. We were always looking like we were struggling, and the timing of the decision was the weird one, wasn't it? You think, give him to the end of the season and then get rid. It just didn't seem to make any sense. But no, I mean, every time we come up, we're not really close. I mean, it's amazing that we got one game away, to beat that Newcastle, because we just looked so far off it the last sort of seasons. And one thing I will say is, I know Darren's talked about the company team that he would prefer to watch. Remember, quite a lot of that was boring as hell anyway as well. That was playing around with it at the back and not going forwards and all that. We remember the bit when they started having a go towards the end. But no, going back to the original question, ALK need to have a sit down. What is it they're wanting? What do they want us to do? What do they want us to be? And there needs to be more messages coming out of the club as well. Don't we? We've mentioned this before.
Oh, yeah.
All the American investors, you know, your JJ Watson, people like that, very vocal when things are going well. But like in life, you find a lot more out about people, don't you, when things aren't going so well. That's when you find out what people are about. And I have to say, I've not been that impressed, you know, because we're not really hearing anything. There is no apparent cohesion. And it is, you know, I'd add ALK's strategy to the incomprehensibility of it. I just don't get it. That's another part of it I don't get. And it just switches people off, doesn't it? People turn off. And next season needs a bit of thought about it, because it's not just next season, is it? It's what comes out of that season. We either come up and we make a better go of it, or God forbid, we don't come up, and then we really are in the you know what, aren't we?
Oh,
Yeah.
but just
Chris,
on
I
the
mean,
recruitment. Well, sorry, Greaves. I mean, just on the recruitment. I mean,
yeah,
ALK came in and they wanted this sort of Moneyball sort of thing. You know, let's use data. Let's identify young. Let's sell. You know, for vast profit. Blah blah blah. Now, didn't do a. You know, we didn't spend a great deal. And I say I'm certainly not bigging up. You know, the previous era. You know, the Garlic. You know, John B era. Because I mean, the sort of the spending just dried up altogether. They expected Sean to work miracles with what he had. But look at what he developed over time. You know, you think about Popey, still playing Premier League football for a Champions League side. Tarky has played virtual ever present for 4 years at Everton. If you go down to you know, Chris Wood, he's had his issues this year, but season of his life last year. Dwight's had a bit of stick, but the previous 3 years at Everton, he's been statistically, you know, Everton would have been relegated, but for Dwight's efforts, arguably, and so on and so forth. You know, he identified these players. You know, Nathan Collins still playing Premier League football for a good Premier League side. He's identified these players who, you know, they've left Burnley 4+ years ago. Longevity. They've continued to stay at this level. And you think of the players that we've signed under ALK. I mean, how many are still? Well, you know, would you say established? Sander Berg, who already was a Premier League footballer with Sheffield United. You know, I think people couldn't believe he spent a season in the Championship with them. But, you know, Weghorst couldn't cut it even when he was. I mean, you'd like to think if you played centre forward for Man United, you'd be able to football it back at net more regularly than Wout Weghorst did. It's staggering, isn't it? You know, the Odegaard bits and pieces here and there. Trafford can't get a game, so on and so forth. Egan Riley can't get a game in Marseille, and it's just telling to me that the sort of the previous recruitment, they're all still there at this level. And we've been just sort of like misfiring in that department. And no, it needs a real sea change, really. And it's you think about as and when we go down, you know, we have to spend on Florentino. Is he going to stay around in the Championship? Is Ugo Chukwu going to stay around in the Championship? You know. I would imagine Broja. Well, I would imagine Broja. It might do with Broja the world of good, to be honest, of a season at that level. But it's going to need yet another overhaul. And it's just you're not building anything, you're not developing anything, and it leads again to this apathy with the supporters, because players aren't here with us long enough for us to build relationships with them, for them to become heroes to us. And in the end, you get what you get at the moment. Is that we couldn't care less, because they're not they fly. You know, a lot of them are fly by nights.
Yeah. Yeah. And Martin, I mean, that brings us on to kind of, the inevitable. The season tickets are going to go up. We know season tickets are going to go up because that was what was reported. There was a consultation with the Fans Advisory Board, which, said season tickets were going to go up. We've already got people a bit miffed that it looks like they're getting rid of the kind of interest-free direct debit option. There's going to be some kind of fee attached to that. There's the apathy around the playing squad, which nobody can get behind. Suddenly, AOK's investment in this shiny toy, it looks a little bit like a really bad investment, doesn't it? If crowds dip to what, 13,000, 14,000 next year in the Championship, especially if we don't repeat the miracle of the last 3 times we were in the Championship. Is there a bit of a feeling, and we kind of wondered this when Alan Pace took over, or ALK took over at Espanyol, that there's almost a kind of like, oh shit, things might not, we don't want to get dragged down into, running a club with crowds of 13,000 who are struggling to get out the Championship and we can't make any season ticket sales. Do you think there's those conversations going on, or at least that thought going on within the minds of some of these ALK investors?
I don't know, because we to be fair, we did think this about 2 seasons ago, didn't we? When we came down last time, we were worried about it, and I don't think it dropped as much, but it just
kind of had the company bounce, though, didn't we? I guess we I guess thought we'd still have company because season tickets go on sale so early, and
no, that's true, yeah, and the style of football definitely increases the likelihood of that happening, of there being a drop off. And then we could end up in a situation, like you say, that ALK start thinking, well, I'm not sure this is necessarily worth the effort if they suddenly see we're getting 13,000, 14,000. It's a bit of a chicken and egg scenario, isn't it? Because if they invest in the team, more people buy season tickets, but you kind of buy season tickets before your players start getting tired, because obviously your early bird, or whatever it's called now, that closes. But it's certainly a concern, isn't it? Because people are getting to the point where they think, this is a lot of money now, and I don't have a season ticket anymore. Unfortunately, that I possibly could afford one if I lived closer, but there are people who I know that won't be able to afford it. And as a non-season ticket holder, individual games are ridiculously expensive now, I think. To me and my 3 kids, it costs a hell of a lot of money as a non-season ticket holder to come on. And these are all the things that they need to be thinking about, because whilst they budget probably for going down every time in the Premier League, they need to start thinking about, well, what does happen if it goes wrong next season? They can't just bury their heads in the sand and go, well, it'll be okay. We've come up the last 2 times. It's nailed on. It might be a bad division, but if we lose the wrong players and we get a bit of bad luck with injuries, look at all the teams that have gone down. Your Southamptons, your Sheffield Uniteds. They're in the wrong half of the table, and they're not going to make the playoffs, I wouldn't have thought, unless something massively surprising happens. And it's the next season that has a massive impact. You go from 13 or 14,000, then you're back down to your 10s and your 11s, and you can't afford the players that you need to get you up. And are they going to invest the money? So it all comes down to these serious conversations that we're having. What is it they want? Are they prepared to put their money in? And the finances are not looking fantastic, are they? It needs sorting out, doesn't it? It really does.
Yeah. And Chris, I mean, we've talked a lot, talked a lot before about, the ALK broom sweeping through, and obviously we've got Daz, who was one of those to leave during the kind of early-ish parts of ALK's reign. It feels like there's just not enough sense, really, of what the football club's culture is, doesn't there? I mean, we've got, we've got a constant churn of communications managers and commercial managers and ticket office managers and people in charge of retail. And, they might kind of go, well, these are the people we want to make money. We get all these kind of shitty little sponsorship deals that get cancelled pretty quickly. I mean, I mentioned the favela lager, the old slum lager. That was championed as the kind of, the official beer of Burnley Football Club. I mean, it's some shite made in North Yorkshire by a guy who once went to Brazil and it's the spirit of Brazil. That's disappeared from the website and you can't get hold of it for love nor money, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing for anyone who's tasted it. But it just feels like, they bring people in who probably, talk a really good game about how they can bring sponsorship and things like this. Everybody's kind of consultants. They're obsessed with consultants like the Americans often are. But there's no foundation stone, is there, for what the culture of Burnley Football Club is? And it feels like two things, really. One, I think if Alan Pace could make enough money without having fans in, I think absolutely he would rather have a football. He'd rather play games in front of corporate fans only and not us pesky little bastards who whinge to him about the temperature of pies.
I think that's the same
and B,
anywhere
I think
now,
he
isn't
also
it?
kind of... Possibly so, yeah. Maybe I'm being a bit unfair. But it's kind of like... It's almost as though they expect us just to believe everything they spout. You know what I mean? We know Espanyol fans have kind of started to turn on ALK already because just like Pace promised with Burnley fans, ALK were going to do everything in their power to support the manager and push for Europe. They're on a 5, lost 4 in the last 5, lost the last 3. It just feels like it's kind of skin of the teeth kind of stuff, and it almost feels like the old .com bubble might be about to burst for ALK, doesn't it?
So I've never understood the end game. What do they? Because you're not going to make money out of Burnley Football Club. We're not a superpower in English football. You're not going to transform us into a superpower. We're not going to become America's soccer team. This, that, and the other. And it's just. I say the way they took over the club, same as the Glazers. You can't do it anymore. It's never sat right with me. You go back. I barely know. I bet I know a couple of staff there now, whereas previous you knew everyone, catering staff, the community staff, ticket office, front office, all over the shop. The media seems to be a revolving door, so there's no consistent message there. It's all fudged. And again, he's been a busy man, Mr. Pace, but he hasn't. I mean, Twitter's become a cesspit, hasn't it, of late? So maybe he's steering clear for a reason. But he does write. He does use his program notes, but he's not tweeted since we won at Wolves. And there's no sort of like messaging that way, which I would imagine there's still an awful lot of supporters, access their information, that through that medium. It's just all. I mean, I think JJ Watt gets a bit of stick, but I think he's stood up a few times, and he does seem to bat for Burnley. I don't know. This week's probably a tough one for him because he'll be. I would imagine he's an extremely busy man on this particular week. Where it's we all know what's on Sunday night, sort of thing. But it just when you start hearing the sounds that are coming from Spain are almost exactly the same that were coming out of Burnley, pretty much upon they took over. The club's in debt. It's not a healthy situation. We can't compete financially, so we can't just keep yo-yoing because sooner or later the yo-yo snaps and we'll end up stuck in the championship. And you just like I say, Martin says. I mean, when we are relegated, my word, there's some big hitters down there. Next season, we're likely to go down with Wolves, who seem to be already sort of reshaping things with an eye on it next year. That might be a West Ham or a Forest come with us. Then you've your Leicesters and teams like that. Chef U's business in the deadline when absolutely made a mockery of ours, isn't it? Obviously, there's a lot of debate whether whether Calvin Phillips would have been probably wouldn't have been a great signing for us in all due fairness. But Sheffield are having a good go, so it's just I've never seen the end game. I don't know what's the plan, and I'm still like we're 4.5, 5 years down the line, and I'm still none the wiser, to be honest.
Yeah, Martin.
Yeah, I was going to say the thing that kind of annoyed me or upset me the most was the kind of throwing out of the baby with the bathwater. I've no problem with them coming in and sort of employing people they know, mates and stuff, but I think to get rid of so much local knowledge and people in every department that you just think knew the club, got the club, were all about the club, and just wanted the club to do well. I understand that perhaps they wanted to make it, I'm going to use the word more professional, and that's not meant to insult anybody, but just to make it a little bit more sort of, fewer little loopholes here and there where if you knew somebody, you could get something and all that. I get that. But there's people in all, we've got people who were in the ticket office, people who ran the stadium, people who were in the media, and they just were jettisoned, weren't they? And like you say, they just now, I wouldn't be able to tell you any of those people, whereas previously they'd been there for 10, 15, 20 years. And it strikes me as a little bit sort of arrogant that they just think, well, we're going to come in, we're from America, we know business, therefore we can run a football club. It's not quite as simple as that, is it? You can't beat expertise. You can't beat people who know what they're doing. And I have no problem if they brought somebody in above all those, but there just doesn't seem to be. I mean, we talk about the cohesion in the team. There doesn't seem to be any cohesion within the club. Like Chris is saying, what's the point? They're not going to make loads of money out of it. If they sold it now, they'd have lost a load of money. It's in their interests still, you would think, financially, for us to be in the Premier League, but also as an established Premier League club. So that, again, it's another tough discussion that they need to be having at a different level. What the hell are they doing with the club, and how are they going to get there? There's so many of these levels. You think about every level of the club. We're in a bit of a mess, and it should be that we come up into the Premier League and we have a good season and we enjoy it. But this is exactly the reason why the last 2 times I've thought, no, just take half the money and stay in the Championship, because it just turns into an absolute mess. And you end up thinking, bloody hell, roll on August when I can actually start enjoying it again. But no, that was the thing. I just wanted to come in there. Just that complete lack of sort of local understanding, and they just seem to want to get rid of everybody. It never quite sat right with me, that.
Yeah. Final question just to wrap up then, and I'm going to ask you both the exact same question. It's quite a simple one. I mean, we ain't going to get rid of ALK, so that's not going to be the thing that changes. Is there any point in potting Scott Parker now? And if you were Alan Pace, would you pot Scott Parker?
I think it depends on those conversations that I think need to happen and should be happening. If they haven't already happened, they need to happen soon, don't they? And it's what comes out of those conversations, and it's whether they're convinced by what Scott Parker has to say, and then they have to decide what they want to do. I don't really see the value in getting rid of him now, because I think you ask 1,000 football fans, you'd be lucky if you found one of them that thinks we can stay up. I think it's beyond the realms of possibility now. So is there any point? Are we going to just go for a few games where they try a bit under Jackson and anybody else you can find there? Sadly, I don't think I would, but I think it does come down to what does Parker say. Is he going to change his style of play, or is this just the way he plays? And then ALK have got to go, right, this is what we're going to settle with. Are we happy with it? Are we not? But it's also going to come down to the recruitment again. Does Parker want to stay? He might get to the point where he thinks, do you know what? If they're not giving me any control of it, I'm not bothered. And maybe he'll talk himself, like a few of them have done recently. Maybe he'll just talk himself into the point where, they're gonna fire him based on what he says in an interview. So I know that's not answered the question, but I think there's so many variables there. You've got to wait and see what comes of them. And of course, we'll never find out exactly what happens. But no, I don't really see the point now. I think we've gone past the window's closed. What we're going to achieve, maybe a few tweaks to the tactics, perhaps, but it's not going to suddenly win us 6 games, is it? I don't think.
Yeah. And Chris, I mean, just again, just briefly from you, same question, I guess, is have we missed the window to sack Scott Parker? And if you were Alan Pace, would you sack Scott Parker now, or is it a pointless exercise?
Yeah, so 4 years ago we weren't in this dire situation, and they managed to, they jettisoned Sean on Good Friday, which you got a bit of a bounce, but it's. My only concern is, like, I mean, there were suggestions that Brian Laws could have gone before the end of that, his half season in the Premier League, if you will, and he had that hovering over his head that entire Championship campaign. I mean, we were 2 points off the playoffs when he was sacked in December. I mean, he had just lost at home to Scunthorpe, which beggars belief. No, I mean, Scunthorpe were playing Clitheroe in the FA Trophy the other week. So but it's one of those. I just think there'll be this sort of overriding hangover, and these fans will never be won over by Scott Parker unless he turns into. He transforms his philosophy like some sort of Brazil 70 football, which just isn't going to happen, is it? He's a pragmatic man. He's a pragmatic manager. He's played under, like say, the Souness's, the Kirbisleys, the Mourinho's, that type of manager. He's not going to all of a sudden go, all out gung-go football. So it probably needs a new broom. So it's whether you do it now. I mean, if they lose against West Ham, it's going to be like horrendous at Turf Moor Saturday. I mean, that might be the final straw, but again, we're not hearing any signs, nothing from the ownership. So who knows? might just plod on with no message, no guidance whatsoever until the summer.
Plod on rudderless. What a few months we've got to look forward to if that is the case. A big thanks to Martin and Chris for joining us. We were hoping we might be able to cheer people up, but I don't think Martin, you were any less depressed cop than Chris Boden. But maybe this is what Burnley fans are into at the minute in some kind of weird sadistic way. But we'll be back no doubt later in the week to try and preview that West Ham game. But until then, try and enjoy the rest of your week. Just think things could always be worse. You could be a Blackburn Rovers fan. And up the Clarets.